The parking lot was mostly barren. A few cars spread out across the asphalt lake, dim and shadowed in the moonlight. The hospital itself was largely dark as well, save for the neon sign and a few sparse window lights. The air was bone-chilling and vacant as it rushed across the parking lot, whipping my clothes around me. It carried the scent of rain. My heart was hammering, my brain trying to work out some way to convince the nurses to let me stay in the room with my mother, at least see her and make sure she was all right. I had to warn them about what was sure to come for her. The automatic doors slid open and I slowly stepped inside, feeling the cold air rush in behind me. The single staff secretary looked up from behind small red glasses. "Hey," I spoke before even fully reaching the counter. This is going to sound a little strange, but I need to see my mother. I have reason to believe her life is in danger." The nurse's expression corroded into confusion. "Which patient are you referring to?" she questioned. "Is she in critical condition? If so, she's likely been transferred to—" "No," I spoke. Room 13B, she's on the first floor, and no, our house was broken into a few hours ago, and..." "You're the brother?" the secretary questioned, looking down at her computer before glancing back up to me. "The brother?" I questioned. "My sister and I both came here earlier, if that's what you mean?" "Yes," she spoke. "And your sister just came back to see your mother. She said the same thing you're telling me right now. Lily, right? And you're John. She said you were waiting out in the car. She didn't remember the room number, so I told her, but informed her that I can't let anybody in past visiting hours. She agreed to just go home for the night, and..." I was long gone, tearing down the hallway, my sneakers squeaking on the dark, reflective tiles in the dim light. The nurse called out behind me before I heard her pick up a phone and call for what I assumed was security. I didn't care. My heart was racing, questions rushing through my vision as I sprinted towards my mother's room. I burst into the next wing, running down the faintly lit hallway, locating her room again instantly. I scrambled through the doorway, my fears being realized before my eyes could widen in horror. The figure stood over the bed, hideously black and hunched in the darkness. The faint yellow of its ragged coat was only visible in the light of the machine beeps. The figure wasn't tall, but from this distance I could clearly see the way its gangly limbs splintered from it like spider legs, disproportionately long and thin. It moved in a surreal and horrifically jagged motion as it jerked upwards at my approach. Its head tilted upwards in panic. And that's when I saw them. Sickly spheres, swirling with darkness as particles of fiery ash danced through them like fireflies. Its eyes. One a yellow vat of bile and faint gold filth, the other blue and hideously icy in its piercing intensity, only corroded slightly by a brown that ate away at its edges like rust. The pupils were like a jagged gash through the irises, narrow, sideways rectangles. They contracted into flat lines upon seeing me, and the figure flashed into stagnation. Contacts, I thought instantly. They had to be, but why put on such a show when also hiding behind a hood? The eyes flashed between my mother and I, the only sound the rain dripping from the figure's coat, light splashes in between the soft beeps of the machines. My heart was screeching against my ribcage, my hands shaking, my muscles distant and faint. The window to the room was open, likely where the figure had entered from. Ghastly wind howled through the opening, rain lashing at the floor, black puddles growing in the darkness. My hand slowly snaked up the wall to the light switch, my pulse so deafening that all of my senses dulled to nothing. That's when the figure moved, jagged and wrong, its foot lifting up like a stop-motion puppet as it took a light step forwards. "John," my sister spoke, her voice splitting apart with static before wavering into focus again. "Don't." My hand froze solid, my eyes staring widely into the darkness of the room. "Our mother is in danger," she continued softly, twitching in the darkness and cocking her head to one side as she wiped at her mouth. "Leave us alone." She took a step forwards now, dark hair now barely visible under the hood. She swayed on her feet lightly, jaggedly uneven movements in direct contrast to how she seemed to bear no weight at all. "Trust me, John," she soothed, her voice almost carrying physical mass as it radiated a sickness. "Do not touch the light. She needs to sleep." She wiped at her mouth again, saliva trailing between the sleeve of her jacket and her cooing mouth. My fingers twitched against the wall, my teeth gritting as my mind went into overdrive. My muscles ached as if I had to fight just to keep them consciously a part of myself. "Lily," I hissed into the darkness, vaguely aware that I was having to brace myself against the wall. "Why are you wearing that hood?" Too late. My peripherals split apart with a gash of air, and my eyes had no time to detect movement before a black blur slashed forwards. My sister's palm hacked against the wall, slamming my wrist down from the light switch and pinning it in place with what I had once assumed to be a knife. As the light of the room glinted off the surface now, however, I could see it resembled something far more horrific. A bony, rough, and impossibly thin needle extended forwards, the tip of which was now broken off inside my wrist. That's when the shout came, footsteps rounding the corner. Security. My sister had no time to react before I took full advantage of the disturbance, slashing my other hand forwards. I flicked the switch. The girl shielded her face instantly, wrenching my hand to the ground before the flash of light even allowed me to make out much of anything. Her dark, wet hair spilled out from her hood as she rolled, wrenching my hand out into the open. The heel of her boot came down on my wrist so hard my fingers cracked under the pressure, going limp despite my attempts to clench them tight. The girl clawed at my palm, slashing the needle tip out of my skin. Her yellow form blurred as she scrambled across the room, slamming the window from its hinges as she jumped out. The glass of the window pane danced across the floor, cracking under my weight as I staggered to my feet. "Oh no, you don't," I hissed under my breath, feeling the now empty gash in my palm, not a shred of evidence left. The brief glimpses of her face hadn't allowed me to truly determine who it was, but I was going to find out. The security tore down the hallway, bursting into the room to find no one there. Their forms and the hospital disappeared into the distance as the pavement rushed past underfoot and my teeth clenched. The sky erupted in a violent flash, the tinny sound of metal being struck by rain overpowering everything. The black splatters on the asphalt soon began to be obscured by the water, and my teeth gnashed as I scrambled through the streets faster, my legs burning and my breathing ragged. I had thought I might be able to follow the saliva trail, but that was quickly proving to be impossible. My light jacket rapidly became soaked, the rain lashing at my face, my hands clawing at my eyes to keep the water away so I could make out a faint trail. My wounded hand burned with agony, but I hardly had time to worry about that now. It was becoming more and more clear, however, that with every turn, I was simply guessing which way to go, nothing still visible in which to follow. My fists clenched harder, my feet pivoting and staggering slightly as I slid to a stop in the middle of a four-way alleyway. I wiped the rain from my eyes, flinging it to the waterlogged street in rage as I spun in frantic circles. I cursed under my breath, ready to simply pick a direction before movement suddenly caught my eye. It disappeared around the corner of one of the alleyways, my ears picking up the faint sound of splashing feet. I scrambled after it, rounding the corner and instantly feeling my chest clench as I saw the yellow-coated figure tear around another building, its arms spread out behind it. I was amazed I had managed to catch up to her, but the fact that she had been waiting for me never even crossed my mind until I rounded the corner at a full sprint and felt my legs give out instantly, some sort of razor wire slicing straight into my flesh and leaving my body to tumble like a broken doll. Despite the cold, wet ground thrashing through my vision in swirling motions, I hardly felt the crack of the ground on my body. By the time I rolled to a broken stop, face up, it had become clear that this was because I couldn't feel anything at all. Lights left dancing trails through my vision despite the fact that I couldn't move my eyes. The rain drove straight into my wide open lids, my fingers twitching lightly by my side as my body was racked with utter numbness. The only thing I could feel was a hideous stinging sensation at the point of contact of my leg. The wound felt like it was on fire, being branded with an increasingly hot fire poker. The wire still lay, slack now as it fluttered softly in the wind, embedded in my flesh and wrapped around the exposed skin of my leg, like some kind of spider web. Its incredibly fine surface was all but invisible, aside from the minuscule rays of light that gleamed along its surface. The ghastly, dual-colored eyes again splintered into view as the girl let out a light cough, her limbs pressing against my paralyzed body as she crawled over me, adorning heavy black gloves. She delicately unwound the wire from my leg, careful to keep it from exposed skin as she shoved it into a pocket of her jacket. I was finally regaining some control, able to wrench my eyes from the sky after some effort. The faint lights of the city danced through the girl's foul, vibrant eyes as she finally met my gaze. I choked on rain, trying desperately to speak but unable to do more than blink the rain from my eyes. The girl's face came closer then, needle teeth flashing in the darkness. Her mouth not widened into a hideous smile or splitting apart her cold, thin lips, instead forming something indiscernible as she softly blinked. Black sludge flowed out between her teeth. She looked to be practically choking on the substance, swallowing hard as it dribbled down her neck into her coat. Her next words stopped my heart as she stood slowly, towering above me, her yellow coat flapping in the wind. "I'm sorry." And just like that, the figure was gone. The dark sky the only thing visible above me as the buildings jutted up in every direction. I lay for another 5 minutes, the seconds ticking by like hours as I strained and squirmed, my muscle contractions playing out all wrong and burning with agony. I lost track of time by the time I was able to steadily rise to my feet, my pale limbs raggedy and shaking. The emptiness around me was complete, the only movement the rain sloshing down the streets like they were torrential riverbeds. My steps were uneven and staggering as I began a wounded walk back to the hospital, clutching my hand and still feeling light twitches rack my body, the gash in my leg burning. My vision was going dark, shapes pulsing through my peripherals, my surroundings incredibly alien by the time the hospital parking lot sprawled out in front of me. This time, however, it wasn't vacant at all. Flickering lights dotted the landscape, blue and red flashes tearing through my narrowed eyes and leaving my brain to throb in agony as I put up my hand to shield my face. The next several minutes played by in fast motion, my fuzzy brain not even realizing I had reached the police cruisers before a voice cut into my head. "John Matthews," it spoke, the sounds of frantic shuffling being heard before I finally opened my eyes all the way, and felt my stomach drop in panic. I nodded slowly, my shaking voice rushing forth. Yes, that is me. Hands on your head, the man continued, several guns trained on me from various officers. Down on the ground. John Matthews, you are under arrest for suspicion of murder. You got this. Lily spoke softly, her hands gripping my arm so tight that I could tell even she didn't believe it. I just gave her a pained smile and nodded softly, watching her walk off down the school hallway, stealing several more glances back at me. I took a deep breath, nodding again to myself before extending my shaking hand forward and gripping the handle. The door creaked loudly, the cold air of the hallway rushing into the space as I slowly stepped inside. The class looked at me. Faces draining of color so fast I could imagine blood running from their dead lips as they drew their last breaths. None of them said a word, but the air was quickly saturated with so many toxic thoughts that I felt my lungs shrivel. The classroom, although brightly lit with sunlight and humming fluorescent bulbs, decayed to a dull gray instantly. Pencils stopped. Hands came to rest uneasily on notebooks, the desks themselves seeming to tense. The teacher himself appeared stunned for several seconds, the silence so ravenous and complete that even the most carefully constructed phrase could not have dissolved the tension. Hey, I croaked, needing to do something, anything to cut away this horrific scene. I felt the eyes of my peers attempt to strangle me as my words decayed into the filth of the room. Mr. Matthews, the teacher coughed, his hands rushing to adjust his ties. He continued, Welcome back. We were told you would be joining us again today. He coughed again, even his best disguise not enough to mask his darting eyes. Please have a seat. Okay, I stammered, knowing full well what fears lay behind his dark eyes, but not having the words to dissolve them. Thank you, sir. The eyes followed me to my desk, never truly leaving, despite pretending to shuffle away as I glanced back at them. I sat slowly, my pale hands coming to rest atop the desk before I nervously tried to take on a normal pose, resting my head on my hand and glancing up at the professor, who was all too eager to continue the lesson, the tension likely getting to him as well. The class dragged on for what seemed like eternity, the sick feeling never truly leaving my stomach. It wasn't until class was finally over that Max and Sarah approached my desk, everyone either walking out of the room instantly or hanging around, continuing to steal glances at me. Being a murder suspect isn't enough of an excuse to only show up for the last period of the day, you know. Max laughed gingerly, flinching as soon as he said it, as if testing the waters. Sarah hit him. Good to see you again, John, she smiled. We missed you last week. Thanks, I mumbled, staring down at my desk, forcing out a laugh before pulling together the strength to flick my dead gray eyes up to Max. And yeah, I grinned. Guess I'll have to be proven guilty for that excuse, huh? He smiled, the expression flinching into his face as if he were afraid of it. Just be glad they're not detaining you anymore, Sarah smiled half-heartedly. 96 hours of that shit. Bet that was fun. At this point, they're running out of time to convict you. If they haven't pressed formal charges, that means they believe your story, right? I I think so, I sighed. I hope so. I told them the truth. That's really all I have. My eyes darted to my notebook, blinking slowly as my fists clenched. I was lying to my friends again. First, I had lied to them about not being there for Marcus's murder, something I finally had to admit to the police. In actuality, I hadn't told the police everything either. Sure, I told them what happened, but I left out the strange eyes and horrific characteristics of the figure, the way it imitated voices, the way it knew my name. None of that helped my case. It likely just made me sound as insane as I felt. It's okay, Max affirmed. You'll be fine. It's a bit insensitive for us to be asking about all this shit anyway. I'm sure you've gone through it enough. I'm just glad, you know? Jesus Christ, talk about a scare. When they issued that killer warning with your name and picture, I just about shit myself. We never believed it. Sarah spoke softly, her small hand coming to rest slightly on my back. Just know that. We never thought it was you. Not for a second. We still don't. Yeah, Max stuttered. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant... It was just... Yeah. Well, then you are among the few, I sighed, drilling my pencil into the paper of my notebook. Even now, people aren't convinced. Max and Sarah exchanged nervous glances. The police will clear you as a suspect soon, Sarah consoled. Then all these assholes will realize their fear is making them judge you too harshly. They just want someone to blame. They're terrified, John. And Mrs. Dieter, I mumbled to myself, my voice dying out before I could continue. She's only been missing for a day, Sarah wordly consoled. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, just rather unfortunate timing for your case. Speaking of which, how is your mother? Max stammered. I heard she's talking now? Is the coma... You know? Yeah, well, I half-heartedly grinned. That's what I heard. My sister and I weren't there for that. One of the nurses reported that she mumbled something yesterday. I guess it's something. Although she isn't recovering much, at least she's stabilized. Their pitying smiles made me want to scream, but I just grinned back, fiddling with my notebook. Get some sleep, dude, Max spoke worriedly, his eyes reflecting my ghastly form back at me. We're already late for that meeting, but Sarah and I will see you tomorrow, alright? If you want to hang out after our meeting gets out, just shoot us a text or something, cool? We're here for you, dude. Yeah, I grinned. Thanks, guys. Their forms disappeared out into the hallway, and I gazed down at my notebook, my pale fingers feeling the grooves left by my pencil scratching. The eyes on the page stared back at me, recreated to the best of my memory, slit pupils radiating out blue and gold. Beneath them, a hideously large smile crawled up the page. No matter how I drew the eyes, however, they just didn't seem to match the horrific smile. They just seemed dishonest in themselves, more concerned than anything. No matter how many times I angrily erased them and tried to redraw, however, the result was always the same. My rage grew each time, and finally my hand clenched my pencil so hard my knuckles went white and I scratched out the blue eye, tearing through the paper and leaving graphite to splinter in every direction. I breathed heavily before slamming my head to the desk and slumping over in defeat. My gaze flicked around the room, realizing that several people were still shuffling with their bags to leave, the dark pupils now staring at me. One of them was having slight trouble standing, his skin seemingly bleached in the faint light. A girl stood beside him, trying to help him stand, a gesture he quickly slapped away, assuring her that he was fine and walking out of the room. "That the killer?" A voice behind me suddenly spoke, a finger pointing to the paper underneath me. "That'd be the best one yet." My tired eyes flicked behind me as I sat up slowly, catching the kid in my gaze. It was Steve, a classmate I'd known for some time but rarely spoke to. Another girl was with him, one of Sarah's best friends, Katerina. Her green eyes widened at Steve's confrontation, her hands moving to clutch her chest as she hurried out of the room, as if not expecting him to talk to me. "Just a doodle," I spoke, closing the notebook, looking up at the clock before slowly standing up. "Sorry, dude. My sister's out of class now. I told her I'd go watch her volleyball game in the gym." "Doodle of what?" he asked, pressing further, his voice beginning to take on some disdain. "Looks creepy as shit. Maybe that's what was behind the hood, eh?" "Doubt it," I mumbled, putting the notebook in my backpack as I slung it over my shoulder. "You're right," he jeered. "At least that would be something, right?" His eyes looked away slowly, as he clearly forced himself to say his next words, shoving down his empathy. "You got a police escort, John?" His teeth gnashed as he continued. "I talked to the teacher about it. He's not comfortable with you being alone with us either. The class all feels the same. They're all just a bit too scared to say it." I cast my eyes downwards. "I don't have an escort," I spoke slowly, meeting his eyes as they flinched away. I'm sorry, Steve. They're tracking my phone, though, and they call periodically. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Thanks for letting me know. If I can do anything to help, you don't have to be scared. Just let me know." His eyes twitched, entirely underwhelmed by this response, his brow soon furrowing in rage as he stumbled over his words. I'm not," he snapped. I just... No, you can't do anything to help." He grew further flustered as I just looked at him, and his hands pressed against the desk. "What gives you the right?" he hissed. "You've done nothing to prove your innocence. You have no He was cut off as a pencil slammed into the desk, the needle tip just centimeters from stabbing straight through his hand. The tip embedded in the wood, right in between the webbing of his fingers, clipping his skin slightly. He yelped in shock and yanked his hand back. My sister stood, breathing heavy, her steely eyes vibrating as her hand gripped the pencil. "It's not about proving innocence, you piece of shit!" she hissed, angrily yanking the pencil up from the desk, tearing up splinters of wood. "It's about proving guilt. What era are you from? Who the hell are you to say shit like that?" Her hand clenched the pencil by her side, shaking with rage. Her zip-up hoodie was falling off her shoulders as she stood hunched over, her gray undershirt making her colorless eyes appear all the more vacant and cold. Her spindly limbs glowed a dead white, her bangs obscuring her face slightly and leaving nothing but clenched teeth to focus on. Steve flashed pale, taking a step back. "Guilt?" he cried, his words quiet and muttered. They caught him on several security cameras approaching Marcus's house. He was sending the guy death threats." "Both things he admitted to," Lily hissed, snapping the pencil in her hand, a spray of hot blood speckling her hoodie. "That proves he was there, not that he killed him, you arrogant fuck." "Lily," I cried, putting out my hands. "It's fine, he has a right to—" "No, he doesn't," she gnashed, her eyes remaining on him. Light blood dripped from where she gripped the pencil, the splinters driving into her skin further as her hands cracked with pressure. "He doesn't know a damn thing about you, or any of us." I grabbed her hand, causing her eyes to snap open, her spindly legs to halt slightly. Her fingers slowly loosened as I worked the pencil free, watching the wooden splinters clatter to the floor, several splatters of blood dotting the ground soon after. Steve's eyes flashed down to this, then back to our hands, his legs backpedaling frantically. Jesus Christ, he cried. You two are fucking insane. Stay away from me. He continued scrambling backwards, looking like he wanted to shout out something else before giving up and simply scrambling out of the room, still stealing glances behind himself. I looked at Lily's hand, lifting it up before she quickly wrenched it away in rage, her face going red. I'm fine, she mumbled, shoving it into her pocket, the other hand adjusting her ponytails. Her eyes flashed back in my direction, seemingly unable to meet my gaze. Why do you let them talk to you like that? She spoke, her voice dropping. It's not right. It's fine, I sighed. I understand where they're coming from. They're just scared, Lily. You shouldn't be so hard on them. What the hell was all that? Are you okay? I heard our principal talking, she spoke, standing stagnant in the empty room, her reflective, cat-like eyes flashing the orange glow of the space. On my way to the gym. Miss Kanade? I stammered, turning around to face her. What about? She's receiving complaints, Lily continued, stepping forwards towards me, the malice in her face dissolving into worry as the light hit her skin. The parents are threatening to send their kids elsewhere. But because of me? I stammered, my fists clenching. Our town was so small, our school even more so, our senior graduating class consisting of no more than 25 students. I knew everyone here, thought of all of them as acquaintances, if not friends. Their parents all knew our family as well. We had lived here longer than pretty much all of them. For everyone to be so quick to turn on me. Were things really that bad? They said they don't feel comfortable with you around, not having a police escort, Lily spoke, disdain filling her voice. But Miss Kanade was talking about how the police don't have the resources or suspicion of you to assign one. She doesn't want to do anything, but it seems like the town council is really riling people up. Well, what can anyone do? I spoke, exasperated. I can take some sick days, I'll do what I can to lay low, but I have to attend school eventually. It's mandatory. The police warned me that if I get in the smallest scrape with the law, that's why she's probably going to expel you. Lily cut me off, gaze darting to the ground. My fist slackened, my mouth opening. I haven't done anything wrong. I stammered into the vacant air, watching my voice die out in front of me. You don't deserve any of this, Lily cried, her eyes finally meeting with mine. These people know you. How can they suspect you? You're innocent. I stayed silent for several seconds before beginning to walk towards the door. You're just scared too, I spoke softly, stopping and looking at my shoes. Scared that you're wrong about that. You should get to the locker rooms. I'll meet you in the gym when your game starts. The approaching evening wind battered at the windows of the school, lengthening shadows crawling out from under the vacant desks. A blackbird took flight outside, rustling feathers drifting down from its perch as the tree shuddered slightly. Lily didn't say anything for some time, but just as I was about to continue out into the hallway, her voice crept forwards. Even if you are the killer, she whispered, her feet kicking the pencil lightly, rolling the blood across the floor. I don't care. I coughed, my eyes widening, the extent of her shadow eating into my peripherals. She rushed past then, her face flushed red as she ran off down the hallway towards the locker rooms. I sighed heavily, uncertainty shaking my heart. I slowly went to go pick up the pencil fragments off the floor, queasiness eroding my veins as I spent the next several minutes simply staring at the blood-speckled ground. I wasn't sure what scared me more. The fact that Lily likely did think that I was the killer, or her following chilling words. That's when I heard the footsteps. I slowly turned around, ready to make up a frantic excuse for the bloody pencil, before my eyes narrowed in confusion. A gangly figure entered the room slowly, the same sick kid I had watched stagger out of the room at the end of class. Except now, however, his nauseated eyes looked broken. They twitched between various locations, never staying on anything for any amount of time. His pupils had constricted to where there was virtually no black. His irises themselves seemed to be speckled with filth, the usually hazel tone punctured with lacerations and corroded into dark crimson rust. His mouth gagged slightly, his neck limping his heavy head forwards, as black saliva slowly ran down his face. And that's when I saw the knife. The blade swung limply by his side, his fingers slowly curling tighter around it. Yoni? I stammered, backing up. What the hell are you doing, man? He said nothing, just gripped harder, continuing to walk forwards. Help? I cried to the hallway. Someone help! The kid's hand just slowly brought up the knife, as I did in fact hear panicked footsteps resound down the hallway towards us. After raising the knife, Yoni's feet slowly staggered to a rest, his muck-filled lips parting in a hideous smile, the saliva sticking the skin together, leaving tendrils of flesh to nearly sew his mouth shut. Feet suddenly rounded the corner into the room, heavy boots splintering into view, but far too late. Yoni's hand suddenly thrashed, the blade glistening with a sharp crack as he pivoted the handle violently, stabbing the weapon forwards, into his own neck. His throat snapped, blood erupting into view as he went limp as a doll. His smile never faded, not as his head rolled backwards with a gruesome show of broken bones, not as his body dropped lifelessly, his marionette strings cut with rusty scissors, not even as his skull impacted the ground, his limbs not so much as twitching before he lay dead, scorching blood cooling into a dense slag around his form. My gaze instantly flashed to the observing figure in the doorway for help, landing upon a girl with long black hair draping to her waist. Her mouth was splintered open in utter horror, her pale skin seeming to physically radiate a white glow as her petite hands crawled up her face. "Are you okay?" she cried, stepping forwards, her impossibly slender form snaking atop her spindly, long legs, largely covered by some kind of ornate dress. My irises just contracted into horrified pinpricks, my breath catching. The girl's gangly legs caught mid-stride, her face erupting in further concern as I scrambled backwards as fast as I could. "What?" she stammered, eyes flashing between the corpse and me as she took another step forwards. She wore a blank white hoodie, crudely zipped over what appeared to be an absurdly decorative Victorian-era dress. She looked to be in my grade, roughly the same age as me. But that wasn't why she looked familiar. Blue and gold. The two colors glared back at me from within her dark-rimmed eyes, radiating an illness that made them hard to focus on. Her gold eye lay speckled with faint orange, the blue one piercing through my skin as she searched my face. I stammered, my eyes digging into her, tearing up and down her body. Who are you?